Hello, once again. Long time no see, I guess. It's been quite a long time since I've done one of these episodes, for my solo channel. But welcome, and thanks for at least clicking on this video to watch. Again, yeah, it's been a long time since I've last done one of these. I think that the last episode I put up on this channel was back around Mother's Day, probably. Yeah. But here I am. I've had plenty to think about, plenty to process mentally, and I'm left with quite a bit to talk about now. So here we go. This episode is going to be different from the last, not just visually, but I think also in structure. So I'm going to talk about at least a couple of things. Not doing riddles anymore in this one, but I am adding something that hopefully gives you at least a little bit of a chuckle. You don't have to think so much, but again, I hope it gives you a little bit of a laugh, because we could all use at least one laugh, something to laugh at each and every day. So, welcome. We're gonna move on to the first segment in this episode. Thanks. All right, so for this first segment, I kind of want to use this segment to, I guess, update those of you who have been to this channel before, or maybe just using it to apprise some of you guys new to this channel what's, I guess, been going on. Stuff has still progressed in my life. I'm still going through a considerable, large transition. Gosh, it's been almost a year, and even in all this time, I still feel weird saying it, but I've been going through a divorce, and I'm definitely in a lot better shape now than I was when it all first started, obviously. But again, I've been transitioning from a life that I thought I knew, I once knew, to a life that is just going on day by day. And I've found a happy place, definitely mentally, I think. I still have my off days, but who doesn't, really? Whether they're going through a transition, a life change like I am, or they're changing jobs, or a new addition to the family, or they're, changing a place, like they're moving from one place to another, maybe city to city, or hell, country to country, whatever. So I've been dealing with those changes, getting used to those things that have changed, and am living a decent life, or at least feeling decent about things. I still have, plenty of family who have been there, even if I haven't, if that makes sense. And that's the cool thing about that. That's the lovely thing, the extraordinary, the exceptional thing about having a family, especially a family like my extended family, that has always been there, is there, and will be there even when I'm not. But again, going through that kind of life change I'm going through is, it's still going on. And those of you who've been through it can relate. The legal process, can get drawn out. And it's drawing out for me too, right now. So I'm just been kind of, flying on autopilot as far as that's concerned every now and then. And just taking things day by day there. My professional life, if you will, my work life is still the same, still working in the same place, progressing there, getting my experience, hopefully one day moving up, one day soon, whatever. Family life, apart from my extended family is what it is. And on a side note, I know my grandfather will probably never watch this, but shout out to him because of his age. Shout out to him. He just recently had his 90th birthday. And a lot of my extended family, not even, I think at best it was a fraction of us, but many family members, myself included, and my two sons, came out to help him celebrate. So yeah, he's 90 years young, and my grandmother is not too far behind either, but they're just the same as they always have been, at least to me. Apart from my extended family life, my more close personal family life, that being me being a father to my two boys, is as good as it can be, all things considered. I won't get into too many details about those things to consider, but all things considered, it's as good as it can be. Both my boys love the time they spend together. They love the time they spend with me. There's lots of laughs, and life is life there. Having said that, I want to take this opportunity in this segment to say thank you to those of you who have been there for me. And whether it's something as small as just answering a small, simple text from me, to texting me out of nowhere, or sending me a DM, to reach out and say, hey, I want to check in on you, how are you doing? To upwards of people, wanting to hang out, or, inviting me to come out, spend time with them, get back into the world, get back into some kind of a social life, or even those who've taken it even further and given me, presented me, I guess if you will, a shoulder to cry on, or lent me their ear to talk off, because I'm a talker, obviously. So thank you to all of you, big or small, involved or uninvolved. Hell, thank you to those of you who have even shown me one face and, behind my back have a different face. I don't hate you. I'm not holding any grudges, because at least you did something for me. So thank you. Especially thank you to those people very close to me, whether you're friends or family, whether you've been my friend, whether you've been some of my closer friends, like in my close circle of friends, my best friends, or what have you, who, one time in the past we hung out, or we spent time together more frequently, and now not so much anymore. Thanks to you guys, because you're still there as far as I'm concerned, and sometime soon, I believe, I'll be back, or I'll be back there. I might not come out as often, or you might not see me on, my social media feeds. Not that I'm an avid social media user. I'm kind of one of those old souls I use it, but it's not my life's blood, if that's the term. But thank you to those of you who really have a vested interest in me and have noticed my absence. My absence is definitely not anything personal. It's personal to me, but it's not meant to be maliciously personal or maliciously charged. My intention behind my absence is not against any of you, friends or family. I needed to withdraw into my shell sometimes, not to keep going over all the bad things, but it was like me hibernating, if you will. I had to fold back within and recharge, not just physically but mentally. And going through the life change that I'm going through, this divorce, just put it out there, this divorce, I've had my ebbs and flows, my highs and my lows. And I've been in my cave, if you will. Wink, wink to those of you who get the reference. And the ultimate goal was always to come back out into the light, if you will, or out back in society. And I have been out here and there, time in and time out. I've been back out, but to be where I think I want to be, where I believe I can be, that's I firmly believe I'm 95% there, if I gotta put a number on it. But again, to those of you who've noticed that I haven't been around, or I've been silent, I've been quiet, it's just part of my process. And thank you for understanding or not understanding. Thank you for wondering. Thank you for, for having so much concern. I appreciate it. I really do. This process, while this change, while it's been going on, while it's doing what it's been doing, it's been such a learning experience. And one of the things it's done is it's indirectly shown me, head on, right in front of my face, who simply cares and who simply doesn't care. It's shown me, who I can trust and who I can't trust. It's shown me definitely indirectly what is important and not so important to other people, like people who don't have anything to do with my change or my personal situations, but people on the outside looking in, or who might have something to say or want to get themselves involved, or are a party to or audience to things going on, whether it's personally with me or the people around me. It's been very interesting and thought-provoking for me personally to see what kind of things are important to them, what things aren't important to them, what they're willing to tolerate. It's shown me their personal morals, or at least it's left an impression on me of their personal morals, but that's a whole other story. For those of you out there, just know that my absence and my silence just ultimately is nothing against any of you. I tend to be an introvert by nature, and I some of that has shown, streaks of that has been been shown by me on and off again through this whole process. Not as much as it was in the first few months of this whole change, but it's still something, like I said, it's part of my being, it's part of my nature to be introverted and to not want to talk to people, to deal with people. It's not that I hate people. It's not that I hate society. That's definitely not the case. I just, need me time. That's it. Although, if I gotta fully disclose things, I mean, working in retail and customer service does kind of make you hate people. And it makes you appreciate the whole concept of being an introvert a lot more, because you just don't want to see people. You just don't want to hear things. You don't want to hear their drama. You don't want to hear their stories. You just need that time with, me, myself, and I, as they say. You need that time alone to just de-stress, let things flow, have a good cry, have a good laugh, listen to some music, meditate, whatever, just to, find your own happy place, day by day, or what have you. So, again, thank you to those of you who, dropped the line, whether you dropped the line the first time like months ago and haven't done anything since, or you drop a line once a month, or, every so often just to say, hey, whatever. Thank you. I really appreciate it. So, enough about me giving thanks and explaining myself. We're going to move on to, am I pointing this way? Okay, this way. We're going to move on to, whichever way I'm pointing, to the next segment of discussion. All right, I want to take this segment and talk about divorce. I'm not going to talk about my own. I know in previous episodes, and even my online writing journal, I have a small collection, if you will. It's only 2 pieces of things that I wrote or I've written in the recent past on at medium.com, and I'll in the description of the video I'll make sure I throw down the link to it so you can read my articles. Again, it was in recent past as far as my articles are concerned, and those aren't just about like divorce or relationships or whatever. It was just me. I got thoughts, I was typing them out, getting them out on paper, if you will. I have my writing background that now dates back almost 20 years of published material that I have. But again, it's just something of things that I write. Various articles is the goal. And again, I'll put my link down in the description below the video. But again, I know I've mentioned or I've talked about, at the very least, just love and relationships before in my previous episodes, and I felt recently compelled to just do it again. I mean, hell, relationships are a part of life. I mean, whether we're talking about, intimate relationships, romantic relationships, or we're talking about work relationships, or the relationship between parent and child, or neighbor to neighbor, anything. Those are relationships, technically. I mentioned divorce because to me it seems like somewhat of a, for lack of a better term, somewhat of a personal epidemic, or these breakups are. Not everybody I know is married, but I know plenty of people who are in serious relationships, or they're still in the early months, initial months of a relationship. I've got some good friends who recently got engaged, and they're taking the first step to making that level of commitment that I was once in before, as were many people. But I've had quite a few friends over the last year, about 12 months or so, who have gone through splits. I have friends who have been on both sides of a divorce. I just recently found out about a couple of more friends that are in the same situation. They've decided to part ways. And I mean, for me personally, anytime I hear about a breakup, it hits me like, and this is going to sound maybe a little weird because I'm not sure if I'm the only person that feels this way, but to set this point up, or this explanation up, excuse me, when I was a teenager, when I was, so we're talking about my high school years, and I know I've mentioned this before, I was, I guess, in the first years of going through my progression into being an old soul. Like I was the romantic type in high school, and I thought it was very important to establish a relationship with a girl, have a high school sweetheart or whatever. And that never really happened. I found myself at that point getting my hopes up with a lot of, I guess, potential girlfriends. I wrote a lot of love notes, did a lot of flirting, that kind of silly shit that kids do. And a lot of times I was disappointed, truth be told. But at that time, it was then when I was beginning to look at romantic relationships as very serious things. Serious in the sense that that love was life. And there's nothing wrong with that. People do believe that, but I was looking at it like that was everything. Love was everything. Being in love with someone was everything. And it should have been everything. That's how I believed it was, in those first few years of my life, when relationships were typical, or sort of common, even amongst teenagers. So to be told that, I mean, even then, and again, this is when it was beginning, to be told that someone was breaking up with somebody else, it hit me. And again, this is going to sound weird. This is what I mean. When I found out about breakups, I hear it in study hall, or I get to lunch or whatever, and they're like, "Yo, so and so's breaking up, with so and so," and I'm thinking about it like in my mind, in my heart, it's hitting me like, "Oh, got cancer." Like it was, I put so much emotional stock in love and relationships even then, that early time in my life, that to be told about a breakup, I thought it was just the worst thing in the world. And these weren't even happening to me. Remnants of that have stuck with me through the end of my teenage years, into my 20s, and now into my mid-30s, where now, having been heard in the last year or so about all these breakups, or people in established marriages, or just, marriages period, are divorcing. And it was even before I had friends like that, like even before I was hit with my own divorce. I to be told, it was like I was still taking it like being told, it wasn't like, oh man, me and, whoever, we're divorcing. I'm like, you got cancer? How much time do you have? And what's the prognosis? What are your options? Because I felt that divorce was such an ugly thing. I felt that it was such a draining thing. I made it up in my mind that it was something that could really take the life out of you slowly and surely. And as I say this, some of you watching are probably nodding your heads going, hey, damn straight. And I came to those conclusions about the concept of divorce before I even met the person I would get engaged to and marry, and then eventually go through this divorce. I thought so much about divorce in that regard that I became naive. I was self-imposing this sense of being naive, like I was never going to get divorced. I was going to meet this one person, fall in love, and through thick and thin, whether it was all my fault or all the other party's fault, no matter what was going to happen, I was never going to get divorced. That's kind of a bold statement, I must say, having said that, for someone who's not really religious. I don't consider myself very religious. I mean, I definitely feel spiritual about things, but I don't identify with a particular denomination. I'm not a member of any church. I'm not a churchgoer. But anyway, to hear certain people are going through divorces, it would hit me. And that was likely because I looked at these folks in these marriages. I looked up to them. Even those who were younger than me, I admired them. I looked at them and I felt that they were doing things that not everybody either would have the chance to do, or other people, choose not to do, or people just don't get to do. And I would believe in every single married couple that I would come across, I would meet, I would get to know. I would believe the same thing, like they were never going to get divorced. They love each other so much that they're going to work it out. And I must say, kudos to those folks who tried to work it out, even if, eventually these marriages would still end. Kudos to you. Much respect to you guys for putting forth the effort to make it work. Because not every marriage ends that way. Some of them are abrupt, they're traumatizing, and that is what it is. Excuse me. Recently I found out about an impending divorce between two people I know. And I mean, I'm almost a year into my split, and I just couldn't believe what I was hearing. Because I thought if the two of them, after going through the hurdles that they had previously gone through, I thought they're making it work. If they can make it work, man, there still is hope for the concept of marriage. I mean, definitely not my own. No. But I looked at the two of them, and they're younger than me, slightly. I looked at the two of them and I thought, that's something to aspire to. I mean, I shouldn't say finally, but I mean, in my life, I didn't have many people, in involved relationships, serious relationships like that, apart from the family members that I know and love. I've known and loved as far back as I can remember. I've got people in my immediate family, my family tree, that have been married long before I came along. My two grandparents I just mentioned, to me, they are the personal standard. They've been married over 60 years. And I know they've had their highs and lows. I don't even know their full story. I mean, their lives together are, epic novels, I imagine. I mean, you live as long as they live, seen what they've seen, done everything that they've done. It's a long story, and I don't even know the whole story, but I mean, I know more than enough to look at them and go, that's how you make it work. But these folks I mentioned who have settled on divorcing, they were making it work. They were trying to put in the work to salvage what they had set up, to save or rebuild or heal, repair what they had initially, the foundation they initially put together when they started their marriage. And I admired them for that. Through that attempted rebuild, if you will. I still admire the both of them because they're being very civil about it, being very human or humane about it, as far as I can tell. I mean, I don't live with either one of them. I don't talk to them every day. I just, kind of see what I see on social media, and I've reached out a little bit just to, give support because, I mean, sure, they both know I've been there. I mean, I'm still there. But it really hurt when I found out about them. They're such good people. And I really didn't think this would happen with them. And I'm saying this and I kind of feel like I'm talking about one of them or both of them is dying from like a disease or cancer or something. I guess some bitter people will be like, yo, divorce is a mother cancer. It's a cancer in my wallet or whatever. I don't know. I don't really know. I don't really know. I'm talking out my it hit me when I found out they were. But they weren't the quintessential married couple. I mean, nobody is. But as an outsider, someone on the outside looking in at them, I looked at them and I'm like, yo, they really love each other. They have what I believe, what I was viewing as love for each other, for one another. And love for what they were building, what they had built, and love for what they believed they could save. So now, they're splitting up. I guess when I think of them, I ultimately would think, I would hope that they don't, as they move on with their lives, and they go on and do other things, I hope that they don't write off the concept of marriage. If they do, they do, whatever. I can't control other people outside of myself. I know I haven't given up on that. Like, I believe in marriage. I believe marriage is a thing worth having. I believe that perhaps one day I might one day be married again, and by then I know I will be wiser. I mean, right now I am wiser. I've definitely learned from what I've experienced in these these last 12 years, but I'm not writing off marriage. I'm not writing off being in love with someone. While divorce is the biggest breakup, in my opinion, the biggest breakup in one's life, it's still a breakup. Yeah, it still hurts. There's still rebuilding, there's still, things to process, there's, all that stuff under the sun in going through a separation, a breakup. But I'm not done with marriage. I mean, I'm only in my mid-30s. I believe one day it'll happen again. I mean, if the opportunity is there, I'm not gonna look at it and go, F that. No, I'm never getting married again. No. Because many people out there have done it again, second time around, and they're still going strong. I mean, hell, some people have even done it a third time, and it took the third time. Third time's a charm for them to finally be happy and live a life with someone, if that's what they, ultimately wanted to do. I thought about these two friends of mine, and I didn't really feel sorry. I understood. Yeah, because earlier in my life, I used to feel so sorry. I used to, it was like a cancer. I felt like, oh my God, everything is over for these people. And I admit, when I was hit with my divorce, when I had it in my hands on paper and I knew this is what was in front of me, I thought I was going to die. I mean, not like I was going to expire and, have a funeral service, all that. No. I felt like I was emotionally dead. And I felt so down, like I was never going to get those emotions back. Like I was never going to be able to repair myself and have the ability to feel emotions that I once felt for someone that was, at the time, I felt very important to me. And I felt that I was definitely even. I was so pessimistic and down about things. I felt like I was never going to have everything that I thought I had at that moment in time, before things abruptly changed. But I haven't written off my life, because my life is still ongoing. And for those of you who are going through your own splits, your own divorces right now, young or old, life's not over. People were saying this to me like 8-9 months ago, and I was thinking it was bull, because I was still so hurt or scarred, traumatized, whatever. But life is not over. It's not over at all. For those of you, are going through tough times, I would say, do the best you can to work it out. Counsel. Talk it out. Give it every chance. Don't give it 3 strikes or whatever. Take a chance time and time again. Especially if you've got kids, I would say. But ultimately, if you're going your separate ways, you're going your separate ways. If it's just not there, it's just not there. I would say be human to each other. Take advantage of each other while you are going your separate ways. Because a divorce is not a game, and it shouldn't be a war. Because quite frankly, there are no winners. It's a kind of thing that there are no winners at the end. And if you disagree, that's cool. Leave a comment if you want to. But while I've got the mic and I'm talking, there are no winners at the end of a divorce. When a divorce is over, there are no winners. You're just not together anymore. That's all that is at the end. You just try to make the best of it you can, but there is no winner and there is no loser. It just isn't. If you have the chance to make it work, I would say. Kind of going off on a different tangent there, and I don't want to rant either, but man, I was so floored when I found out these two folks were divorcing. I mean, I was floored every time I found out I had friends that were divorcing, and I just was like, man, what is going on with people? Why are people, I mean, there were times when I thought people were so quick to jump to divorce. I just felt like, they were having, maybe a few moments leading into it where they, the two parties, they just hated each other. And all it took was one person to go, you know what, I'm divorcing you, I'm done. It's like, do you know what's required of this when you divorce? Do you understand the ramifications? Especially with more people that are involved. Like if there's children involved, or even just one child, it's like, do you understand what's going to happen, not just now in the next, several months, but in the next several years, and then years down the line? Do you understand what's ahead of you? What people could be subjected to? All the intangible things, the things you haven't even thought of? Because lots of things get affected, but I had times where I just couldn't understand why people were it seemed people were so quick to divorce. Because when you look at it on the other side, people aren't that quick to fall in love. Like 20 years ago, I was falling in love with girls, and it took me a while to understand that you're moving too fast, man, and that's going to scare women off. It's going to scare anybody off, whether you're gay or straight, whatever. I mean, you come on to somebody too fast, and that, 9 times out of 10, that's going to scare somebody off. And if it doesn't scare somebody off, that's a cause for concern, I think. Like, you fall in love with somebody quick, and that person falls in love with you quick, like a little too quick, you might want to take a step back and think about things. But like I said, most of the time, when one party comes on too quick to the other one, it scares the other party, and they're going, whoa, okay, we're going too fast. And in, typical decent relationships, two people get together, they go on dates, they get to know each other, they spend more time together, maybe they move in together, and then they get engaged, or, maybe, different things are different, but it takes that gradual time to meet someone, to, like them, really like them, love them, want to be with them. You start discussing marriage, maybe, if kids are somewhere in the future after marriage, or hell, even before marriage, whatever, in your partnership. You talk about kids, you talk about all the, those bigger things, but those are gradual things. And it just seemed to me like these folks that went through that gradual process, on the positive side of relationships, man, they jumped like the house was on fire. Like they jumped out the window like the house was imploding on fire, to end everything, like that. That's just the way it seemed. And I'm talking from a little bit of personal experience, because that's kind of how it seemed to me. And I know I'm not the only one in life and in the history of man to felt that way. Truth be told, without getting too detailed, there were issues for a few months leading up to, the I guess you could say horrible beginning of the end. And then there were things that I found out that dated back even further. But anyway, it just seemed that the whole longer process to get to, I guess, that plateau that is marriage, it was just amazing to me how people quickly decided to just, blow up that plateau. After all the work you put in to get to that point, things aren't going so good. Like where it takes you, 3-4 years, just example, it takes you 3 years or whatever to get to that point, then it just takes you 6 to 8 months to be like, this, I'm out. You and everyone, you know, that cares about you, or has anything to do with you, I'm out, we done. It's up. And man, I mean, everybody's different. There's too many people in the world for people not to be different. But man, when you're quick to jump to a divorce like that, it kind of makes things even more traumatizing. Even to the people who aren't directly involved. I mean, the people who are your friends or your family, and they know you're going through that kind of thing. I mean, it hits them. I guess I just wonder, why is it so easy for that to happen? I don't know. I think that's maybe the question I'm asking. Why is it so easy? Because it damn sure ain't easy, at least for the fellas, you know, the people who are asking for a hand in marriage, to, you know, go out, buy the jewelry, set up the whole proposal thing or whatever, if that takes a big setup, to then, you know, marry. You spend all the money to get married, you're spending money to, you know, get a house, you're having a kid or two, that costs money, to then just be like, you know what, I'm done. And then when you're done, it costs even more money to get it done, because divorce requires lawyers 99.9% of the time. But anyway. I guess when you find out that some people perhaps are just giving up on the marriage, it hits you hard, because maybe there's the assumption that, you know, marriage is a big thing. You want to try to keep that ship from sinking before you decide to just, you know, jump off of it with your life preserver. Or, you know, it's just a tiny little fire that you can, you know, put out. Just throw some water on it. You sure you want to, you know, you sure you don't want to try doing that before you just leave the house and let it burn down on its own? I don't know what I'm saying. That's probably a weird metaphor. But anyway. I hope that for those of you who, I guess right now, are currently facing one, going through one, that you guys are human towards each other. I say that, and I don't think I am, in my personal opinion, but at the same time, I'm not very vocal at all. And I have my reasons for not being very vocal. Whether it's me talking to my friends and family about it, or me and dealing with the other party, I'm just not. Especially for the latter. There's really not much I feel I need to say. If you haven't guessed already, I'm really a talker, and that's probably one of the things that the other party really hated about me, or, you know, had discontent about me for. But that's a whole other thing. I mean, I don't really care about that. But I did a lot of talking in the beginning. I felt I needed answers, or, you know, closure or whatever, and when that wasn't going to happen, when it was obvious that wasn't going to happen, I was just like, all right then. There's really nothing else to discuss apart from the brass tacks, apart from the business aspect, I suppose, of things. And, you know, one, maybe two important things in regards to what me and the other party were going through. But If I had to give advice to people, I would say, look, if you're going to split, man, just be human about it. Be human towards each other. I mean, there's no need to be nasty to someone. It's kind of ironic. Like, I wouldn't be necessarily nasty to someone that didn't necessarily, didn't all out deserve it, I felt. And it's like that on the other side. I mean, I'm pretty sure there's folks that feel like I deserve what I'm going through. I'm obviously going to disagree. I mean, I know what my responsibility was, or what I volunteer responsibility for, or what I admit responsibility for, but there's some other stuff that just, that wasn't me. But anyway, be human towards each other, I would say. And for each of you, whichever side you're on, do the best you can to cope. I will say that none of you are going to find true comfort in someone else going through your process. Sure, you're going to date around, people date around, whatever. But solitude does wonders. It's like, for example, if you're in a hospital with whatever might be wrong with you, you're not going to tell somebody to just jump in your hospital bed with you while you're healing. I mean, that might sound like a weird metaphor, but I mean, there's no way that works. No, you're admitted, you're in a hospital room, and apart from visiting hours, you're alone. Or apart from visiting hours and the medical professionals that, have to engage with you or interact with you, you're alone. Because you need that solitude to heal. Whether you're the aggressor, whether you're the quote-unquote victim, whether it was your fault, it was solely your fault, you're divorcing, or it's the other party's fault, no matter how much hurt that's been caused to you or that you've caused, you need solitude. And in that time, you need to heal. And you need to believe that life goes on after that. I mean, if you have guilt about things, voice it. Let it be known that you feel guilty. If you need to give closure to somebody, give that closure. If you need to get closure, don't kill yourself over getting it, because not everybody's going to get it. Trust me. Spend time with people. Spend time with your friends. Spend time with your family. Always laugh at something. You gotta laugh. Oh my God, you gotta laugh. You have to laugh. Whether it's you laughing at your kids, corny jokes your coworkers are telling you, videos you see on YouTube, something you see on TV, whatever. Laugh. Laugh. Remember that this is a process. And please do not give up on things. Don't give up on your friends, your family. If you've got kids, don't give up on your kids. By God, don't give up on your kids. Those are the ones that really need to know that you won't give up. Because one day they might be in your shoes. And if they saw the most important people in their lives didn't give up, they have every reason to not give up themselves. If you have to give up on your union, don't give up on yourself and the ones you love, the ones who love you even. So. Man, divorce is just a tricky. Damn. All right, I've literally talked almost 40 minutes about divorce, and I've branched off on different topics, different things about that thing. Talked a little bit about myself. Talked about some other folks who shall remain nameless and how that made me feel about things, but it's time to change the subject. So, moving on. Yeah, he's getting impeached. All right, I wanted to take this segment and talk a little bit, definitely not as much as the first segment, about my grandfather. And in talking about my grandfather, I'm going to talk about my grandmother as well, most likely. As I mentioned previously, earlier in this episode, my grandfather has just turned 90 years old. And at this point in my life, in my mid-30s, I don't really know him to be any different than what I've always known growing up. And yeah, I've obviously, gotten older, gotten bigger, taller, stronger, etc. And I've changed, but the whole while he kind of hasn't changed for the most part. At 90 years old, you're not really working a whole lot. Some are still, because they might have to, and then others not so much. But as far as my grandfather is concerned, my grandfather always had the knack to be an early riser, up early in the morning, and get to work doing something. And it's only been, I think, in the recent year or so where he finally stopped working. And, he's been spending his time with my grandmother, who is only a few years younger than he is. And my grandmother is going through some, health concerns, has some health concerns herself with, not to get too personal, but she's been dealing with dementia the past few years at least, past several years really. And maybe one or two other things that I won't get into detail about, but the two of them coexist, and they are living lives as happy as they can at their age. But actually, the both of them, I don't know them to really be any different than what I've always remembered. And my memories of them go as far back as me being about 3 years old or so, roughly around the time my mother got married. My mother married my stepfather, who pretty much was my dad. And I remember being the ring bearer at their wedding and being very, very bashful, very shy. I didn't like that feeling of everybody looking at me at that age, so I couldn't walk all the way down, down the aisle in the church or whatever, carrying the rings or whatever. I was so scared that my grandmother, as a matter of fact, got up from where she was sitting, came all the way to the back, and had me, walked with me down the aisle. And I was supposed to stand there, I think, behind my mother it was, but I literally stood behind my mother. Like, I hid in the train of her dress, which, on a side note, her dress was really my grandmother's dress, same dress they wore. In fact, on another side note, my grandmother actually wore that dress again when my grandparents had celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary back in 2001. Yeah, so do the math. They've been married quite a few years, my grandmother and my grandfather. This time of the year, October, a few things occur. My grandfather celebrates his birthday, and then a few days later, one of my uncles celebrates his birthday, and also my grandparents celebrate their wedding anniversary. And man, to think about my grandfather, and to think about the two of them, really, I can't think about one without the other. Their house was my first home, the first home I would ever come to know. And as far as I'm concerned, I mean, I always looked at the two of them and that home, or that house, that structure, as my grandfather made sure that the house was a house, and my grandmother made sure it was a home, if that makes any sense. They are more than just roots or pillars. They're more than just a foundation. They're more than just the rocks, if you will, of the family. They are something that at least I sometimes can't find the words to describe. But if there is a word, at least, they are family. And those people, the members of my family that they've produced, and the members of my family that those members have produced, and so forth and so on, generations henceforth, it's family. And the two of them, they always made anyone who were, fortunate enough, lucky enough to walk through the threshold of their house and be in their house, as long as they respected themselves and respected, the members of my family, they practically were family, if they weren't blood related. Some folks, unfortunately, have betrayed that concept, or burnt those bridges, whatever. No one's perfect, or not everybody can be decent, I don't know, but to be so inclusive as they were then, they are currently, and will be tomorrow, next week, in time to come. When we being my family, and myself included, when we gathered recently to celebrate my grandfather's 90th birthday, so many of us got together, and so many of us, we weren't all of us. I mean, there were members of the family that live here in the same place I live, same area, that couldn't make it. They didn't make it out to physically be there. And then there's so many of us, most of us based out of the South, being Mississippi, and stretching across the state line of Mississippi, the northeastern state line of Mississippi, into the southwestern tip of Tennessee, that being Memphis, Tennessee. In that area, that's where most of us had, I guess you could say, based out of. But then we've got family out in the Northwest, we've got family out west, family up in the Midwest, up in Chicago, the Detroit area. There's folks here in New York, myself included. Many of us are still down south in Mississippi and in Memphis. Excuse me. But the amount, as I said, the amount of us that gathered, recently, that's a fraction of us at best, and it's a small fraction. I mean, if you don't understand what I'm saying, I mean, when we have family reunions, we will pretty much take over a hotel and all of its ballrooms. Well, maybe not all of them, but we will take over a hotel. I mean, it's like a convention or some kind of a seminar or whatever that comes to town, and then they rent out the entire hotel. We've been known to do that in years past, and still, for years to come. But I mentioned my grandfather, of course, and I mentioned gathering recently for his birthday, and I looked at it in such admiration. I felt an equal amount of admiration for man of the hour, if you will, and his wife, my grandmother. Because as I said, I can't have one without the other. I can't imagine one without the other, even though life is life and life doesn't go on forever. That's a whole other conversation. But I was equally, I had equal admiration for the rest of us that showed up. And there were faces I hadn't seen since last year, sometime last year, before I was even making changes in my personal life, and at times secluding myself and just having a lot of me time and not wanting to talk or see people, whatever. There were people I hadn't seen in over a year, and over that amount of time they knew what was going on with me, and we would check in on each other, maybe via text or phone call or something like that, or we would just kind of maybe eavesdrop on each other's social media, whatever. But to physically see everyone, and apart from maybe outfits, hairstyles, as far as the kids were concerned, the kids get taller, they get bigger, they get older, my children included, of course. And that concept of watching the kids grow is always something to speak of. But the adults, myself included, we really haven't changed. Our personalities really haven't changed. We all get together and we're the same people. It's as if we've never been apart, or we hadn't been apart that long. And I talk about that because, man, that was such a comfort. And I was so eager to be able to come out and I guess help celebrate or take part in celebrating that occasion. But what really I was really looking forward to being out of the house, or what is my house or my home now, and getting to hug one another, take pictures, laugh, catch up, have a lot of laughs and whatnot. It was such a comfort to me. It on one hand, it helped me, or it reminded me what I had been missing all this time, or what I was usually missing when I wasn't going out, when I was just keeping to myself and dealing with what I've been dealing with. But man, it was like I never left. It was like I hadn't been absent at all. And it was such good medicine to me to see everyone and to see those who, without question, like I never had to question, okay, yeah, you're my family, but do you have my back, or through thick and thin, or do you really care what's going on, or are you just asking because we're making conversation? It was nothing close to that. We were family. And then, when I wasn't thinking about that, and I guess, getting back to my family, when I wasn't thinking about that kind of stuff in those moments, I kept looking at my grandparents. And instead of feeling sorry for myself, and I say feeling sorry for myself because I don't know anyone else personally who has, we want to talk about marriage, and gosh, I don't want to call this episode the marriage and divorce episode, but it just seems like this is what I'm talking about, or things that branch off of that concept of a relationship. But I look at my grandparents, and I don't know anybody personally that's been married as long as they have, that has made it work as long as they have. And something like that's pretty rare. Only folks in their generation will be married that long. And it kind of goes back to, I guess the reason for that that might be a reason why, I was talking about what I was talking about in the last segment about it seems like, folks want to give up pretty easily, or they want to allude to ending things way quicker than they established them. But anyway, I wasn't envious of them. I didn't feel sorry for myself. It wasn't about me. That occasion wasn't even about me. So having said that, I caught myself when I wasn't thinking about, wrapping myself or getting wrapped back into my family, into those family moments. I looked at those two, my grandparents, and I was just so proud of them. I was proud of my grandfather for still being here. My grandfather, yes, is strong-willed. Or if you want to be pessimistic or negative about it, he's stubborn. But I kind of think old folks are. They can be more than others. But I joked with a friend of mine a long time ago when I was talking about my grandfather. I was describing him to my friend at the time. And I said my grandfather didn't grow up in the South. He survived the South. Like many black men, black people in that part of that part of our country. People didn't grow up there. They survived it. And unfortunately, for other various reasons, people are still surviving the South. They're surviving anywhere with color in their skin, but that's a whole other topic. I was so proud of him for making it this far. I mean, he is a force to be reckoned with, but at the same time, he's not quiet, but he just lives. He just lives his life. Most of the time when I see him, he's in his own home, and he's either sitting in his kitchen eating, or watching something on television, the small TV in the kitchen, or he's sitting in his in his spot on the couch, reading a paper, also while the news is on or something is on television. I mentioned reading a newspaper. I mean, he's the reason, probably the primary reason I read newspapers or I read magazines, because I saw him do it. I might be a little taller than he is now at this point in our lives, but I still look up to him. And in those moments, we're celebrating him. I looked at my grandmother and I was so proud of her. Proud for, I guess at times, being his rock. Proud of her for sometimes tolerating my grandfather. And sometimes showing restraint. I'm proud of her for making it this far as well. I mean, I'm not a very religious person at all. I don't identify with any religion. I don't belong to a church. But man, God bless the two of them. I'm proud of the both of them. And I had a moment to myself when I thought about a long time ago when I was 4 years old. And I remember being in pre-K, my pre-K classroom. That was right down the street. I mean, the school itself is still in use. Still where it is, down the street from where my grandparents' house stands, still. And I remember being in pre-K and we were talking about, the teacher and the teacher aide were talking to the little kids about, grandparents. We're talking about mommies and daddies and grandmas and granddads, aunts and uncles, family trees, that sort of thing. And at that age, at age 4, being, as young as I was and not as educated or ignorant to the facts or ignorant to reality, if you will, I thought that everyone only had one grandma and one granddad. I really thought that, because that's all I knew. You know, as I mentioned, their house was my first home, and when I was 4 years old, that was my home. I didn't live somewhere else like my mother and I and my little sister. We didn't we didn't have a place of our own to live. We didn't branch out until I was 5, between 5 and 6. So I just knew my grandma and granddad, just those two people. But I mean, I quickly learned that people have, or if they're fortunate enough, they have two grandpas, two grandmas. Like I have first cousins, close cousins of mine that had, you know, another grandmother, another grandfather. And yeah, as I got older, you know, I would quickly, you know, learn that I too had, you know, two grandmas, two granddads, you know, still just, you know, one mommy and one daddy. As far as I was concerned, in my personal life, I didn't meet my other grandmother, really meet her, spend time with her until I was a teenager, until I was about 12, 13 years old. Anyway, going back, in that moment, celebrating my grandfather's birthday, I'm looking at both my grandparents, and I remember when I just thought, when I was younger, when I was a small child, and I thought it was just those two. And in growing up, I look back, and I'd like to think that I just needed those two. I mean, as far as grandparents were concerned, they were everything grandparents should be, and then some. That was all I knew. That was all I needed. Were those two. And that continued through my teenage years, and then in my 20s, and still now. I'm always welcome in their home. For the most part, you gotta call first, or the customary thing is, you know, call and just say, hey, make sure they're home, or at least I do, because I still don't have a key to their house. Even though I think every time I come in, my grandfather's like, you know, we should get you a key. He's been saying that for like 20 years. And now it's just kind of a joke where I just kind of go, yeah, well, get on that. I just let him say that. And that's just our thing. But yeah, I was very proud of them. And a lot of that pride came from everyone else that was gathered around them. When we sang to my grandfather happy birthday, or when we were, you know, taking pictures and everything, or when we were all trickling in there, arriving, when we would arrive, to walk up to them first, to hug and kiss them, say hello, wish my grandfather a happy birthday, and give him a card or gifts. And then when we were all finishing up and leaving, we walked up to them first to say goodbye. Or to walk with them and let them, you know, talk to us and ask us questions and catch up. I mean, most of that pride came from everybody else. To look at everyone else who showed up, who were able to show up and show their unconditional love for the two of them, because it's obvious none of us would be here. I mean, to get technical, I know I wouldn't, because my mother joked one time when I was younger that she might not have been planned. Because when some people have kids, they don't wait a certain amount of years in between kids to then have more. And then right after that, she followed up and looked at me and was like, "Yeah, you weren't exactly planned, Hassan." So that made me feel pretty good about life. but no, I mean, just straight up though, if not for what those two did with their lives, year after year, decade after decade, none of us would be where we are without them. I'm so appreciative and so proud of them. Because each and every one of us that walked in there, we were living testimonies to their lives, all their efforts, their energies, the sacrifices that they made. We were all there because of them. And yeah, it was my grandfather's birthday party, so to be a little funny, we were celebrating him for getting that far and celebrating my grandmother for letting him get that far. I mean, I guess when you get old, I mean, if you're married to somebody long enough, if you haven't gotten the points in time where you didn't want to kill your spouse, and then you guys weren't really in love with each other. You had to get both ends of the spectrum with each other to really have a real marriage, I guess. I don't know. But anywho, I wanted to talk about him, the both of them, and maybe give a little thanks, if you will, although I'm not sure they'll ever see this. Maybe they will, maybe they won't, but I mean, I love the both of them, even though I don't say it all the time, and they don't say it to me all the time. That's not a problem, because they never had to. If actions really do speak louder than words, I mean, I knew they loved me like before I learned how to walk, if we want to put it that way. I always know that they're proud of me. They don't have to tell me that. And I believe it's like that with the rest of our family. They don't have to tell us that. We know that. I mean, every time we walk in their home, we feel warm. The ambiance, the aura, the emotions, everything that is family, you breathe it in. It gets into your skin. You see it with your eyes. You can hear it in your ears. It's there. And it's all because of them too. So, man, this segment's been almost a half hour. And I could talk more about the two of them, but I won't. We'll move it along to the next segment. All right. I know I said earlier in this episode I should just call this the marriage and divorce episode, but I'm not going to. It's just whatever number episode this is. But this segment, I'm going to talk a little bit more about divorce. Not necessarily mine. I'm not going to get into details about that, because it's kind of, some of y'all watching this had gotten details or heard me vent, but I mean, it's kind of, it's not public knowledge. It shouldn't be public knowledge necessarily. Excuse me. But what I want to talk about it is what I kind of called the stigma of it, my personal stigma of it. And I hope the things I'm about to say in this regard is helpful to is helpful to some of you who might have gone through it and moved on, or are currently going through it. And even those of you who are or haven't embarked yet on officially into marriage, or are currently married, and perhaps you don't have issues right now, or you're flying autopilot, you're going steady. Maybe you can take this information and keep it in your back pocket for a rainy day or some of those dark days. Who knows? But I wanted to talk about my personal stigma, if you will, about divorce. Now, when anyone is, if and when you tell someone that yeah, me and so and so we're getting divorced. People are like, oh, man, I'm sorry. Most of them are. Other people are like, oh, thank God, man, dude. I told you shouldn't have. if they're that negative about it, but no, for the most part, when you reveal that information, you disclose that to someone, they're like, oh man, they take it as a hit. And a lot of times it's a shock. I practically instantly. Now, I said I wasn't going to get into too much of a detail about it, but I will say there were issues going on in my relationship that had gone on months before, about a few months, at least a few months, 2 or 3 months before I was given papers directly in my hands. And in that time leading up to that, those issues were fermenting, if you will. They were making things more and more sour, more and more stressful. My behavior and actions weren't helping anything, and as I would discover later on, the other party's actions definitely weren't helping anything either, or they weren't going to help anything had anybody known outside of that party. But when I got those papers, I reacted to them in the way I reacted. And truth be told, before I was handed those papers, hours before that, it was somewhat evident, I shouldn't say it was somewhat evident, it was flat out, straight up evident that I was going to get papers. I just wasn't expecting them within hours necessarily. Because of a conversation I and the other party had, and in that time, I remember calling one of my sisters, and I called my mother. I magically drove my vehicle and didn't crash nor hit anyone. I don't recommend driving a vehicle, especially in the winter time, or during winter conditions, maybe in cold weather. I don't recommend driving any vehicle with tears in your eyes while you're gasping for air, trying to take deep breaths. And again, this was before I even had papers, before I knew 100% that this is happening. But a couple hours went by after that conversation. I got papers in my hand, and it was like it was round 2, or possibly round 3, if I want to get technical, of getting hit emotionally. And I gathered myself. I managed to gather myself. I called my mother this time, just my mother, because I'm a mama's boy. I called my mommy and cried, and I got emotional. I was trying to speak clearly. I was going through the papers and reading everything off and everything else like that, and then the very next morning. Before that, I managed to sleep, surprisingly. I had no alcohol, no nothing. I somehow magically slept. Woke up the next morning, and went and got my firstborn son from his home, came back to my home at the time where my other son, my little boy, was, so the two of them could kind of spend a little bit of time together. and they spent a little bit of time together, and then I took myself and my firstborn to my sister's house nearby and celebrated Thanksgiving. Yeah, you heard that right. I got my divorce papers in my hand the night before Thanksgiving. But hey, it happened. But as I mentioned a few minutes ago, I practically instantly, it took the turnover of a day, or less than a day, less than 24 hours for me to have this kind of stigma where I couldn't look people in the eye anymore. Or at that time, I felt like I'm trying to think of the best way to explain this. Have you ever had I mean, not just some regular little zit. I'm talking like a full-on pimple, like an ugly one that you just can't hide, you just can't cover up on your face, and you're in public, you're talking to people like your friends or family, coworkers or whatever you normally have conversations with. They know what you normally look like in the face, but you can't quite look at them because you know something is written, like something's on your face, something's noticeable. That's kind of the feeling I had in front of every single person that would eventually know, either directly from me or because word travels that I was served divorce papers, and I was in the midst of starting the divorce process. I felt a self-imposed shame. I mean, it was like the word divorce was written on my forehead, like tattooed on my forehead. It wasn't going away, no matter how many times I would wash my face or take a shower or whatever. It was written on my forehead. I stunk of it or whatever, if you will. Like, it was just on my back. And I felt so uncomfortable with people. The same people who saw me happy. Some of the same people that had, just as good a time as I did at, when I got married or at my wedding reception, or, other various things that had happened in between then and learning that divorce was happening. I couldn't face these people the same way. And it wasn't out of guilt necessarily. I mean, at no point did I assume, or did I take the angle, take the viewpoint or whatever, the perspective that this divorce was all my fault. And it's not. It wasn't, and it still isn't. I admit, take it to the bank, put it in my pocket, and take it to the grave, everything that I know I was responsible for. But just like it takes two people to fall in love, and if they get married, they get married, just like it takes two people to make a baby, whatever, it takes two people to end a relationship in that fashion, like legally. It takes two people to do that. But I felt such shame in the first few months. Like I felt weird. It was kind of an embarrassment. Now I've had a couple of medical scares in my life, even recently, in my recent history, but I don't fully know what it's like for people to, for example, have cancer and they go through maybe an aggressive treatment that involves chemotherapy, and it changes their body composition, you know, their hair is gone, you know, that other such things. I don't know that feeling when they're in public or they're with their loved ones or their friends, and there's that kind of feeling in the air where it just sometimes seems obvious that these people who are there to support you, to help you through it, they look at you and they know you're different. You're visually different. You're obviously different, whether it's on, you know, whether it's on the surface or it's internal, because cancer is cancer. I don't know what that's like for those cancer patients, those afflicted directly by that disease, for example. I just think, I'm using it as a metaphor because that's kind of how I felt. I felt like there was something within me afflicting me. And everyone that I knew it. And I kind of gave myself a self-imposed stigma. An embarrassment, a shame. That I wasn't the same. The fact that I wasn't going to be the same in the months to follow, the weeks and months, you know, all this time to follow, just the concept of me, you know, not being who I once was. I just couldn't look at people. I definitely couldn't look them in the face. I mean, on one hand, in the beginning, I wanted to vent. I wanted everyone I knew to be there for me, or at least tell me that. I mean, by now, at this point in my life, I know not everyone was. I mean, in fact, I got stabbed in the back by a number of people. I mean, I wasn't betrayed by just one person. I mean, there were a number of people. And there were a number of people that just didn't care as much, or, you know, didn't check in, you know, whatever. I'm not complaining. I'm just saying, in the beginning, I looked for acceptance and concern and care from everyone I encountered, everyone that I knew. I wasn't running to everyone and telling them, oh my God, this happened this way, and then she said this, and I said this, or I said that, and you know, I wasn't talking like that to everyone. I wasn't spilling the beans to everyone. I mean, I wanted people to care, but at the same time, I didn't want people to feel sorry for me. Because I think most people were telling me, you know, you're strong. You've gotten through this before, or not that specifically before, but you've been down before. You know, you can rebuild. I mean, the people who've been through divorce before, you know, were telling me, you know, just stay strong. Just, you know, you got this, man. If you need anything, you know, let me know. You know, yada yada yada. I was adamant that people weren't gonna feel sorry for me. Like, I felt like I had an illness or some chronic disease, and my dignity or ego or whatever, like, people weren't gonna just show me charity because of something that I'm going through. I ironically didn't want that, but at the same time, I felt so inadequate. I remember sometimes emotionally reverting, or feeling like I reverted back to when I was a teenager. And every time, I mean, these are two completely different things, but I remember being a teenager at a time, going through high school, and high school was tough enough, socially and, you know, educationally, you know, or as far as my education and grades were concerned. But when I wasn't doing well in a class, when I was usually looked at as one of the brighter kids, one of the more gifted kids, and, you know, maybe I walked out of a test like having nearly failed it or failed it, because I did that sometimes, I was so embarrassed. Like, I felt like such a failure. And man, I made mistakes in my teenage years and even my early 20s. Out of fear of failure, out of just fear of being viewed as a failure. And essentially that's what it was. The reason I couldn't face people because of a divorce, because I believed so much in marriage, or the concept of marriage, that I was never going to get divorced. I was naive, essentially. Pretty much. I was naive. I felt that I loved this person so much, even the days or the hours where it flat out looked like, sounded like, tasted like, whatever, that I didn't love that person. I still loved that person at the time, and every single day that I lived was going to end at that address in that home with that person. That divorce was never going to be on the table. And as close as I ever got to divorce was shortly before it was imminent. I had mentioned separating, and in my mind, separating, it wasn't going to be like, look, I'm just going to move out and go live somewhere for a few months or whatever. It was like, I'm going to go crash somewhere for like a few days, because I wasn't sleeping much. I was too much in my head. Stress, I couldn't leave stress at the door. Stress was coming home with me, like it was another one of my kids. And it was in the house, within the walls and under the roof. But it was the shame, I guess, of being a failure. And that's the weird thing. I shouldn't say the weird thing. That was what was wrong about it, I guess, if you want to call it something. It was wrong. I was wrong. Because not a single person, even the ones who betrayed me, essentially, for lack of better terms, or those who turned their backs on me or changed their opinions of me, nobody, not a single person told me literally verbatim, word for word, that I failed or I was a failure. Well, there was one person, but that's the other side. It's the other party. But anyway, maybe, perhaps. I don't know. I can't remember. A lot was said. But that was wrong. I didn't fail. And as I said, I felt like I reverted. I did revert. I reverted back to something that I had done when I was younger, where I just put it in my head. My imagination just took over. The anxiety took over, the depression, the severe depression, because somebody's not just breaking up with you, they're leaving you, figuratively speaking. And in my case, they were done with you and making the effort to kick you out of their life. You and anything that has anything to do with you. So there was a lot of depression, a lot of anxiety, a lot of fear, because I didn't know what each day was going to bring. But anyway, with all that, you put all that together with that kind of a recipe, I told myself I was a failure, and that made me feel embarrassed. That, in a sense, metaphorically, I tattooed divorce on my own forehead. I walked around stinking of failure, and that was all my own doing. I either did that automatically, directly, indirectly, whatever. Because in the beginning, I was so down. The only positive thing I was thinking about was that the only positive things that was going on was, at the time, was I was spending time with my kids still, both my boys, as much as I could. I was eating. I wasn't necessarily starving myself. I still had my job. thankfully. I still do. I clothes on my back. My health was, decent. I was living a normal life. I still had friends. Still to this day, a lot of them are, still friends. But as far as my relationships were concerned, I think the only positive thing that I was looking for was some kind of reconciliation. Especially at that time, not knowing, or still being naive about things. For someone who was not so religious, I had a lot of faith and a lot of hope in something that I thought wasn't dead and gone. So while I was walking around with shame, no regrets, but just shame, embarrassment, and a feeling of failure, I would have thrown all that out the window had me and the other party just made up. That's how I was thinking about it, because I was so invested, I was so codependent on someone else. I felt like whatever happiness I did have before November 21st or before November 8th, if you didn't know, I have a pretty detailed memory. But anyway, whatever happiness I thought I had before things went really south, I felt, and it was probably because I was clouded by, the depression, the anxiety, the despair, the confusion. I would have gotten all that happiness back if there was some kind of reconciliation. And that obviously didn't happen. Jesus. Those of you who know, some of this should sound familiar. I wasn't looking any of you in the face, like in the eyes. And it wasn't because I was lying to you or anything like that. I didn't feel like a human being. I felt, less than human because I was going through something that I never thought, or I foolishly never thought could or would happen to me. It was kind of, to say the least, it was ignorant, because I looked at myself in the mirror, while I was married, like, I'm happy. I had a person that, I believed that, would never leave me. We're happy together. We have our, highs and lows, ups and downs, because we're human beings, and, things can get stressful at times, but we're always there for each other, everything else under the sun. And everyone else I looked at, even the friends that I had that were getting married or are married, I'm like, that's your marriage. I'm never going to get divorced. And here I am. So then when it was happening, the first week, first month, first few months, there were times in the beginning, it was so weird when I was making phone calls to attorneys and therapists, and it was so weird that I was actually giving them my full name. They asked me, okay, what's your name, and I'm telling them what my name is. It didn't even feel right. That's how weird things were. The name I had always known that I had, at least since I was 3 days old, 2 or 3 days old, just before I left the hospital. Way back when. It was a name I had grown up with, a name I sometimes hated. The full name, that is, that I sometimes hated when I was a kid because it was always getting mispronounced, whatever. It was so weird to tell people what my name was, because I didn't feel like I was me. looking back on it now, I know I'm not the only one. Those of you who might be going through this kind of thing, this kind of thing, I don't mean breakups. I mean, breakups suck. They do. They suck. Divorces really suck. There's only maybe 2 people on this earth I would wish that upon if I was really that vindictive, but it's unfortunate for anybody. But I know I'm not the only one who felt that way. You know, some kind of, an embarrassment. Man, I was so embarrassed, but at the same time, I ironically wanted, I remember the first, few weeks, the first month or two where, I was, talking to, my close friends. And every time I would get a text from them or a DM or something, I would, I'd quickly pull out my phone, open it up, unlock it or whatever. And I was hoping that the message was, hey, I talked to her. Like, you guys, should talk to each other. No, it was definitely not that. No. And even as time went on, I reached out to a couple of friends on, on the other side, the other party, just to kind of, go like, hey, how are things going? Because we're not really talking to each other, even though we're under the same roof. And, things progressed. I finally got over, or I got through that kind of embarrassment or that stigma of divorce. Like, again, and I'm carrying it around like, this is going to sound kind of gross, but when people have, people have herpes and they kind of have, the visual evidence that they do, there's that stigma, that embarrassment. Some folks, I like to think most, if not all of them maybe, they try and hide it. Hide the fact that they have something they can't get rid of. I don't know, maybe that metaphor works. I don't know. Something you can't get rid of. Like, for the rest of my life now, even if I get married again, whatever I do with my life again, if it comes down to relationships or whatever, it's going to come up where, yeah, I was married before, I was divorced. I can't not forget that. Only Alzheimer's or some kind of dementia is going to get rid of that for me. If I'm morbidly lucky enough for that, I don't know. But maybe that was it. It was the fact that I had something that I'll never get rid of ever again. That gave me that kind of stigma that, hey man, you're different now. You're different. You're just like everyone else. That was pretty ignorant to think that way. That I was not necessarily better than anyone, but I felt special because I had a marriage. I had a marriage, a house, a kid. I had a ring on my finger. I had someone. I had someone that I thought was my other half, my partner, my best friend. Whatever. I was always telling folks about my spouse proudly. I was telling people, she's better than me here. Like, she's way better than I am. Like, I'm the lucky one. Stuff like that. That kind of typical stuff. And I believed it. I believed it in my heart and my soul. I did. But I got through that stigma, that self-imposed stigma, when I knew, okay, divorce happens. This is real. Go into hermit mode and just go into hermit mode and wrap yourself up in your cocoon, whatever, and then when your hibernation is all over, you flap your wings and flourish like a really pretty butterfly, metaphorically speaking. You get back out there in the world, whatever. When I was going through those stages of, okay, I got self-love going on, I got people, friends and family who do love me, that want the best for me, or that want me to, be able to, get my head above water and get through this thing with as little difficulty as possible. That's when the stigma was done. The stigma was gone. I was able to look in the mirror again and go, man, You're human. Some humans go through this. You know, go out there and have some more good days. Yeah, sure, have your bad days. Have your days when things are stressful, or, you know, have those days when you drive past something that triggers, you know, memories, or you hear a song that you still can't stand to hear maybe, or you, for me, like, you put a tie on that, you know, that she liked. Or, you know, you watch a movie that you guys saw in theaters together, you know, whatever. You know, divorce is a part of life. Stop walking around with that chip on your shoulder that you put there, that I myself put there. You know, when I was able to look at myself in the mirror and be like, man, cut that bull. I was able to self-coach, you know, my counselor wasn't doing it anymore. I was able to, you know, coach myself. That's when it was gone. And I'm able to look at it, or look at what's been going on, and laugh at it and accept it for what it is, accept people for who they are, who they really are, you know, whatever, everything under the sun. And I hope you're able to do that too. Whether you're fresh into it, or you're still going through it, or maybe you're on the brink and about to go through it. Or hopefully, you know, you don't go through it. If you do end up in my shoes, the embarrassment is okay, the shame is okay. For many of us out there, anxiety, at the very least, if that's all you're going through, anxiety can really have an effect on you. And that's okay, because you're human. I still get anxious about stuff. Different things, you know. I still get anxious. Maybe not as much as before. Excuse me, because I'm seasoned to being emotional about things, but it's okay. You know, have the fear. You know, go through the motions. Go through all the motions. Have all the emotions. And for some people, it could take as little as 3 months. Some people a year. Some people 3 years. I don't know. Everyone's situation is different. So, having said that, it's okay to feel what you're going to feel, or it's okay to feel what you feel. I would say find a way to talk to people, though. I've talked to people directly. Obviously, I've got, you know, lots of friends and family I can talk to. I can text or whatever. But this medium here, these videos, this is a way I can talk. Even if only one person watches this stuff, or 51, or 101, or if I'm lucky, you know, thousands. I don't know. I know I'm not the only person going through divorce, and I'm damn sure not the only person that has a YouTube channel talking into their computer, or just talking about anything and everything. So, but it's okay to feel what you feel. It's okay. You're going to feel what you're going to feel, and you'll move on. You'll get through it. I would say don't lose hope, whether it's hope in some kind of reconciliation, hope for closure, hope for hope for moving on. Be as positive as you can, despite how much of a trying time it is. Be as positive as you can. Don't give up on yourself. Whether it's you doing it alone, or you've got, you know, maybe kids to think about, or, you know, other people to think about that are affected by it. Just don't give up on yourself. That's all. You can get through this. Yeah, anxiety sucks, depression sucks. And, you know, I've been there, many people have been there, and it's been worse for other people. I mean, I thought what I was going through was pretty terrible. And sometimes it was, I admit, I felt terrible at times. And I mean, even sometimes now, I still might have a small moment to myself where I got to drop a few tears. I believe I've said it before, you should have a good cry. At that a long time ago at that one ESPYs, Jim Valvano said, have a good cry. Have your emotions move you to tears. Laugh for sure. Even if you're laughing at just, corny jokes or whatever, or somebody who's the funniest person on earth, and you gotta laugh. I gotta tell you, laughing, humor, humor, comedy, man, that saved my life many a times, my whole life, not just, this right now, but yeah. But all in all, because I'm rambling on, the stigma, I don't know, let me know what you think. Say something in the comments, please, about the stigma. Because in those moments, initially in those moments, I remember I thought I was the only one. It just felt so weird because I was looking at people and I couldn't talk to them directly to their faces. I mean, even my own mother, my own kids, I couldn't really look them in the face. But having gotten through it and had some time, all this time stretched out to then look back and think about it. I can't be the only one. A lot of you guys out there have to know what I'm talking about. So yeah, let me know in the comments. You don't have to get into details about what you thought about or what brought you to that point. But I know I wasn't the only person. And saying that, I wanted to talk about it so that those of you out there know you guys weren't the only ones. And again, if some of you guys are going through it now, or you think you will go through it, you're not the only one. All right. So enough of talking about my relationships or this relationship thing. We're gonna move this episode along, and see what else I can just blabber on about. People are usually shocked when they find out I'm not a good electrician. You're welcome.
Okay, Mommy's brother is Mike? Well, then who's Uncle Steve?
All right, so how about those Buffalo Bills? Man, they're 5-1 now. They are second in their division, just a little bit behind the New England Patriots as of this recording. They just had a big win, toughing it out against the Miami Dolphins. Speaking of the Patriots, that second game against the Patriots later this season, that's going to be a little more interesting than we've had recently. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to that. And I have to admit, for the first time in a while, I am a little bit more excited and eager to see Bills games than I have been recently. Even more than the year we made the playoffs a couple years ago. I mean, I was interested in the games then, and but this year, yeah, they got it going on. They're putting in the work. They're making it happen. And being someone who was born and mostly raised in this area in Buffalo, it's kind of in your DNA. There's a part of you that wants to see the Bills, have success. So we'll see what happens in the weeks and weeks to come. It looks, I gotta say it looks like now that they're gonna make the playoffs. Where, we'll see. And for all we know, heck, if they could get the other win, the other one out of the two games against the Patriots, and who knows what the Patriots might do this season, whatever, we could end up winning the division. Who knows? But like I said, it remains to be seen. But it looks like the Bills are in the thick of things. They'll be there in the playoffs. I think so. I'm calling it right now. I'm not making any Super Bowl predictions, but I think they'll make it. They'll get in the playoffs, and they'll put up a fight. I think so. We'll see. All right, if you haven't seen it, get online, take your phone out, do whatever, and check out the video of the, I think it was a high school coach, it was, in Oregon, in the state of Oregon, who, through love, determination, and a of courage, disarmed and I say with love, hugged a would-be school shooter. That, man, I like to think I've got a backbone, but I got to admit I'm not sure I would have done that. I'm not sure I would have had the courage or the mindfulness, I guess. Just the mindset to do that. To take that kind of an action, but hey, it worked. It worked. You'd like to think that every incident like that would end that way, and not like what we've seen in our history or in our recent past in this country, with shootings in schools, shopping malls, concerts. Just anywhere. Gosh, there's really nothing else I could really say about that. Get online, check out the video. Just watch. It happens right then and there. It was real, caught on video, and man, I don't know. I've said it once. I've said it many times. I'm not a religious person, but man, God bless them. God bless them both, really, because it could have ended a lot worse than it did. You just hope every situation doesn't get to that point. It's bad enough that had to happen. That someone had a gun and they got on school property. They got in the building, and who knows where it could have gone at that point. But man, you just hope if an incident has to escalate to that point, that's how it ends. Just hope so. Ah, man, what a world we live in, I guess. And one more thing has to do with sports. As of this recording, Rory McIlroy, professional golfer, and I guess you could say, legendary, still professional golfer, Tiger Woods, they have faced off in a skins game. For those of you who don't know golf, I'm going to try to explain this as best I can. A skins game in golf is when two golfers pretty much play the course, and they get. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. Go down in the comments and correct me if I'm wrong. But in the skins game, you're both two golfers face off against one another, and they play the course for points, I guess, if you will, which they, by slang, I guess, is called skins. And in this case, Tiger Woods and Rory McIlroy are doing this thing. I forget how much money is at stake, but they're doing it out in Vegas, or they did it out in Vegas. And apparently that's a big deal. I want to say it was being sold pay-per-view, like to watch. And I guess that's cool and everything. But me personally, I'm kind of stuck wondering why Tiger Woods is still, I don't know, for lack of better terms, relevant. I kind of hope I don't go viral for that. I mean, I'm not trying to diss the guy. And okay, I don't really watch golf too much. I never really have, unless I needed, some static noise and I wanted to take a nap. Maybe. But I kind of thought he kind of maybe not necessarily fell down to like a second tier, but there have been other golfers mentioned ahead of him, like Jordan Spieth, McIlroy's another one, Ricky Fowler I think is another name that comes to mind, and there are a couple other gentlemen that are out there winning tournaments, championships, or whatever, if you will, and they've kind of eclipsed Tiger Woods as far as popularity or notoriety, I guess, right now. I mean, Tiger Woods will always, for one thing, nobody else on earth is really called Tiger, so I mean, you're not going to forget that necessarily. But as far as success in the tournament, he still has crowds following him, down the, throughout these courses and, country clubs that he plays at, or, whatever. It just, as far as successes on the golf course, it hasn't really happened lately. So, I don't know. It was something, I guess, that was notable. They're playing, I think, for a cash prize, which I want to say Tiger Woods has still got a Nike endorsement, or he got it back after all of his past troubles and lows, and so does McIlroy. I know he's got some endorsements. He's done commercials, other such things. It's not like they need the cash prize, and I think the fact that it's being done in Vegas, I think maybe people are taking bets on it, because you can essentially bet on anything in Vegas. I want to say you can bet on spelling bees or gaming tournaments, video gaming tournaments or whatever, but. Yeah, that was just something that stood out to me. I know most of you probably don't really give a shit, but I was just like, Tiger Woods is still a thing? Hey, whatever. All right, that's enough of the mixed bag of stuff to talk about. We're gonna close this episode up. All right, so after all this talking, 2+ hours, finally closing up this episode. I don't think I'd said everything I wanted to say. I'm a talker, so even if I've finished saying whatever I've wanted to say, I like to think, more pops up in my head, and as I sit here talking into the camera, there's still more I could say, but I don't want to keep you. I know every person that watches this, if you made it this far, I know you've got other stuff to do. So, priorities. It felt great to record this content, to vent, if you will, to get my thoughts out to you, whomever you are watching, and it gives me encouragement again to do another one, hopefully soon. Do another episode soon and get more words out there, more thoughts, more opinions out there. I'm glad I did it. It's been a while. Been it's been almost a half a year since I last put something out there. I hope you enjoyed listening. I hope at least at one point during this whole thing you got at least a chuckle out. I hope you found some humor here, because laughter is indeed the best medicine. Damn straight. I thank you for listening, and if you didn't listen to the whole thing, I thank you for listening to something or some part of it. I hope you got something out of it. I hope you come back and get more, because I'd love to share more of my words. I'm not sure what I'm going to talk about next, but I know I'll probably have ideas. I'll have them written down in my book, and I'll say what I can say. Again, thank you for watching or listening, however you got this. Thank you so much. I hope you come back. I hope you like, you share, and subscribe because I will put out more content. Like that I promise you. I'm gonna put more out, and thank you so much just for giving me your time and attention. Until the next time, be safe, take care of yourself, love a lot, cry some, live life. Thank you.